Hello children, welcome to online classes. Today we will discuss important points in electrochemistry. It is a branch of physical chemistry involving the study of relationship between electrical energy and chemical energy produced in redox reaction. So electrochemistry is a branch of physical chemistry involving the study of relationship between electrical energy and chemical energy produced in redox reactions. Let us see the meaning of electrolysis. Electrolysis is decomposition of an electrolyte by passage of electricity through its aqueous solution or molten state. And the device used to study electrolysis is electrolytic cell. So decomposition of electrolyte by passage of current through aqueous solution or else through molten state is called electrolysis, and device used to study electrolysis is known as electrolytic cell. Now let us see the construction of electrolytic cell. Electrolytic cell consists of two electrodes, that is anode and then cathode, placed in electrolyte, something like say MX, electrolytic solution MX we have, and it is connected to the terminals of the battery. Anode is connected to the positive terminal of the battery and cathode is connected to the negative terminal of the battery. Let us now see the process. First of all, during electrolysis, ionization of electrolyte takes place. So you have taken MX electrolyte, ionizes to say M plus and then X minus we have. Now at cathode always cations move. So cations are having positive charge, they move towards negative electrode and cathode is having negative sign. So M plus ions move towards negative electrode, they get reduced. So reduction takes place at cathode, reduces to M. Then coming towards at anode, anions move towards anode. Anions are having negative charge, they move towards electrode having positive charge, and anode is positively charged. Therefore, anions move towards anode there. And here at anode, anions undergo oxidation. Nothing but loss of electrons takes place. So electrons are given off at anode. So at cathode, reduction takes place. At anode, oxidation takes place. Once the electrons are given off at anode, they are moving towards cathode through the external circuit. So we can see the flow of electrons right from anode to cathode, that is through external circuit. This is what takes place in electrolytic cell. Next, the laws of electrolysis, Faraday's laws. First law, the mass of ion deposited on an electrode is directly proportional to the quantity of charge that is being passed. The quantity of charge being passed. The mass of ion deposited at an electrode is directly proportional to the quantity of charge that is being passed. So M is proportional to Q, and M is proportional to Q, replacing proportionality constant. M is equal to Z into Q, where Z is called ECE. ECE stands for electrochemical equivalent of the substance. When you take Q is equal to 1, then M becomes equal to Z, or Z becomes equal to M. So therefore, Z can be defined as weight deposited when 1 coulomb of charge is passed. Nothing but charge is passed is called electrochemical equivalent. Therefore, weight deposited when 1 coulomb of charge is passed itself is called electrochemical equivalent. So the units of Z will be, so Z becomes equal to, from the formula, M by Q we have. And then Q is also equal to I into T. Therefore, Z is equal to M by I into T, where I is called current strength, comes in amperes. Therefore, units of Z will be equal to so many gram per ampere per second. So, units of Z will be gram per ampere per second. So, that is called electrochemical equivalent. It is the amount of substance deposited when 1 coulomb of charge is passed through electrolytic solution. Then comes Faraday's second law. When same quantity of charge is being passed through the solutions of different electrolytes, which are connected in series, the masses of ions deposited is directly proportional to their equivalent weights. So, when same quantity of charge is being passed through different electrolytes which are connected in series, then mass deposited is directly proportional to their equivalents. Means M is proportional to capital E, or else we can say that is M1 by M2 must be equal to E1 by E2. As mass of A deposited by mass of B deposited will be equal to in the ratio of their equivalents, that is E of A by E of B. This is possible when same quantity of current is being passed through various electrolytes which are connected in series. W1 by W2 is equal to, or else E1 by E2 we can say. Then the ratio between chemical equivalent and electrochemical equivalent. Chemical equivalent and electrochemical equivalent. Now here the chemical equivalent is described as mass deposited or liberated when 1 Faraday is being passed. This is taken as capital E. So equivalent mass is defined as mass deposited when 1 Faraday of charge is being passed. And EC is defined as mass deposited when 1 coulomb of charge is being passed. So when you pass 1 coulomb, the mass is called ECE. When you pass 1 Faraday, the mass is called capital E grams. Implies that 1 coulomb deposits Z grams. And then 1 Faraday, nothing but 96,500 coulombs, will deposit. If you take it as how much, on cross multiplication the value comes out to be 96,500 into Z is a mass deposited when you are passing 1 Faraday of charge. But by definition, this value must be equal to capital E. Therefore, we can say that Z is equal to capital E by 96,500. Relation between capital E and then Z. So once again, capital E, the chemical equivalent, is defined as mass deposited or liberated when 1 Faraday of charge is being passed. And small z, that is to say, electrochemical equivalent, is defined as mass deposited when you are passing only 1 coulomb of charge. So for 1 coulomb of charge here, we get a mass equal to Z grams. When you pass 1 Faraday, how much you are going to get? Cross multiply. But by definition, the value is equal to E. Therefore, Z must be equal to capital E by 96,500. So therefore, now we can say M is equivalent to E by 96,500 into I into T can be taken as formula for mass deposited, where I is a current strength in amperes, T is a time in seconds we have. This is regarding Faraday's first law and second law together. Then comes meaning of electrolyte, non-electrolyte, strong electrolyte, weak electrolyte. Electrolyte is a substance which conducts electricity in molten state or else in the aqueous state. You can take all acids and bases which can ionize. Will be coming under electrolytes only. Electrolyte is a substance which conducts electricity in molten or aqueous state. So examples are all acids and bases, HCl, HNO3, H2SO4, NaOH, KOH and so on and so forth. Then non-electrolyte. Non-electrolyte is a substance which does not conduct electricity in molten state or else in its aqueous solution. So it does not conduct electricity in its molten state or else in the aqueous state. So you can take urea, glucose, benzene. They will not conduct electricity in aqueous solutions also. They are called non-electrolytes. Then comes strong and then weak electrolytes. Now, strong electrolyte is which can ionize completely in its aqueous solution. Means value of alpha is equal to 1. Means degree of dissociation is equal to 1 for strong electrolytes. Means which can ionize completely. So you can take example of all strong acids, all strong bases and all salts which always ionize completely now. When it comes towards weak electrolytes which undergoes only partial ionization in its aqueous solution. Here alpha is less than 1. So they are not undergoing complete ionization or they are undergoing only partial ionization. They are said to be weak electrolytes. So examples will be weak acids and weak bases are the examples of weak electrolytes. So acetic acid, oxalic acid, benzoic acid, formic acid, they are the examples of weak electrolytes. Then molar and equivalent conductance of a solution. Molar conductance is defined as conductance of all ions produced by 1 mole of electrolyte in solution of a given concentration. Molar conductance is the conductance of all ions produced by 1 mole of electrolyte in a solution at a given concentration. And units are so many Siemens meter square per mole. Siemens meter square per mole is a unit of molar conductance. And equivalent conductance means is the conductance of all ions produced by 1 gram equivalent of electrolyte in a solution of given concentration. That is called equivalent conductance. Equivalent conductance is the conductance of all ions produced by 1 gram equivalent of electrolyte in a solution of given concentration. Units are Siemens meter square per equivalent. Siemens meter square per equivalent. Siemens meter square per mole. Siemens meter square per mole is a unit of molar conductance. Siemens meter square per equivalent is a unit of equivalent conductance. Let us see the formulas for those two. Now the molar conductance is given by lambda molar is given by K into K by 1000 into C. Here K is called kappa, that is pronounced as kappa. So kappa by 1000 into C. If kappa is expressed in Siemens per meter, and therefore lambda molar comes in Siemens meter square per mole. If kappa K is expressed in Siemens per meter, then lambda molar comes in Siemens meter square per mole. If kappa is expressed in Siemens centimeter per inverse, then lambda molar comes in Siemens centimeter square per mole. Then the formula comes out to be kappa into 1000 by C. Kappa into 1000 by C, where C is said to be molar concentration, so many moles per liter. Molar concentration is so many moles per liter we have. So lambda molar is given as kappa by 1000 into C. That is, if at all kappa is expressed in Siemens per meter. And the same formula comes out to be K kappa into 1000 by C if kappa comes in Siemens per centimeter. C is same in both the cases. There is a molar concentration, so many moles per liter. Similarly, we can write formula for equivalent conductance also. Now let us see dependence of conductivity and conductance on dilution. Conductivity and conductance on dilution. On dilution, conductivity of a solution decreases, whereas the molar or equivalent conductance will be increasing. On dilution, conductivity is decreasing. On dilution, molar conductance is increasing. Conductance is increasing now. Let us consider a solution. Let us consider a solution of 10 ml having 20 ions in that. There are 20 ions in that. Now the conductivity is defined as conductance of ions per unit volume. So 10 ml there are 20 ions, means 1 ml has 2 ions in that. So the conductance of 2 ions itself can be taken as the conductivity now. Suppose we added same 10 ml water. We have diluted to 10 ml. We have added another 10 ml of water for this. Now the total volume became 20 ml now. Number of ions have not changed, but the number of ions in each cc has decreased now. Now 1 ml contains only 1 ion. Now conductance of 1 cc has reduced because number of ions have been reduced. So on dilution, number of ions per cc will decrease. Thereby conductivity gets reduced. When it comes to molar conductance, it is defined as conductance of 1 mole of solute. Defined as 1 mole of solute. So on dilution, ionization increases. Thereby number of ions increase in 1 mole. Hence molar conductance increases. So Molar conductance is conductance per 1 mole of 1 mole of electrolyte. So on dilution, number of moles of ions produced will be increasing, thereby molar conductance increases. And conductivity is conductance of 1 cc of solution. On dilution, number of ions per cc will decrease, thereby conductivity gets reduced. Now, but in the case of strong and weak electrolytes, the increment is not same. Means both will not experience the same increment now. More increase can be seen in the case of weak electrolyte, whereas less increase can be seen in the case of strong electrolyte. So in both the cases, we can see increase of conductance, but conductance will not increase to same extent in both the cases. More is seen in the case of weak electrolyte, and less increase is seen in the case of strong electrolyte. Let us see here. Now, in the case of weak electrolyte, suppose acetic acid here, alpha is less than 1. On dilution, the value of alpha starts increasing now. Means number of ions also start increasing on dilution now. When the number of ions start increasing, we can see increase of conductivity. That can be seen like this here. There is increase of conductivity here now. It is increasing here. Because alpha is less than 1 initially. On dilution, alpha is increasing now. Thereby, ions are increasing. Hence, we can see increase of conductance. When it comes to strong electrolytes, say like KCl solution, already alpha is 1 for KCl solution. So, on dilution, alpha cannot increase. Number of ions cannot increase on dilution. But inter-ionic forces between these K plus and Cl minus ion, they decrease. Because of this, only a small increase of conductance can be seen. So we can see only small increase here of conductance can be seen in the case of strong electrolyte. So in both the cases, we can see increase of conductance, but the value will not be same. In the case of weak electrolytes, we can see more increase can be seen. In the case of strong electrolyte, we can see only lesser increase of conductance. Then comes towards Colorage law. It states that at infinite dilution, when dissociation of electrolyte is complete, each ion makes a definite contribution towards molar conductivity of electrolyte, irrespective of the nature of other ions with which it is associated. So it states that infinite dilution, when dissociation is complete, each ion makes a definite contribution to molar conductivity of electrolytic solution. It doesn't depend upon nature of other ions with which it is present. That is, conductance of electrolyte at infinite dilution will be the sum of conductances of all individual ions. The conductance of electrolyte at infinite dilution will be equal to conductance sum of the conductances of all individual ions. So lambda molar for an electrolyte is given as lambda naught plus lambda naught minus, these two are nothing but ions conductances. So lambda naught plus lambda naught minus represent limiting molar conductance or ionic conductance of cation as well as anion we have. Let us see the example. Suppose you have, say, molar conductance of NaCl. This will be equal to lambda naught of Na plus, means molar conductance of Na plus ions, plus that of Cl minus ions we have. Suppose, let us take another example like, say, molar conductance of, say, BaCl2 is equal to the conductance of Ba plus 2 ion, conductance of Ba plus 2 ion plus BaCl2 contains 2 moles of Cl minus ions. So twice lambda naught of Cl minus ions we have. So the conductance of an electrolyte will be equal to sum of the conductances of all ions which are present in the solution. Let us now see the application of Colorage law. It is in the determination of molar conductance at infinite dilution of a weak electrolyte, otherwise which cannot be founded from graphical representation. Other one is we can find or we can determine degree of dissociation of a weak electrolyte. For this, alpha will be taken as lambda molar by lambda naught molar will be taken. So lambda molar will be conductance at a given concentration, it will be conductance at infinite dilution. So ratio of these two will give us alpha, which is nothing but degree of dissociation. Now comes galvanic cell or voltaic cell, or can be called as electrochemical cell. So a device used to convert chemical energy produced in redox reaction into electrical energy is called galvanic cell. So galvanic cell is a device used to convert chemical energy produced in redox reaction into electrical energy. A redox reaction in voltaic cell consists of two half cell reactions, oxidation half reaction and then reduction half reaction. And a cell contains two half cells. Each one is called oxidation half cell, reduction half cell. Let us see the construction of voltaic cell. The voltaic cell or galvanic cell contains two half cells. One half cell contains, say, zinc electrode placed in zinc sulfate solution. Other contains copper placed in copper sulfate solution. Zinc undergoes oxidation when placed in zinc sulfate solution. So zinc will be undergoing oxidation. It gives rise to Zn plus 2. Plus 2 electrons are given. Happens at, say, anode. When it comes to copper electrode here, reduction takes place there. So copper ions plus 2 electrons which are coming from the zinc electrode and will reduce copper ions to copper. Means zinc is undergoing oxidation here. Zinc ions are produced here and electrons are moving towards the copper electrode here. They are entering the electrolyte copper sulfate solution, and copper ions which are there in copper sulfate solution, they are taking the electrons and getting reduced to copper. So in the overall reaction will be zinc plus copper ions, electrons get cancelled here, giving rise to copper plus, it is zinc plus 2 ions. This is regarding the electrochemical cell, or else called galvanic cell. Now coming towards important point regarding charges here, anode is having a negative charge here and cathode is having a positive charge in this case. Now let us see the role played by the salt bridge. In this diagram we can see a salt bridge connects the two half cells now. Let us see the role played by this salt bridge in the galvanic cell. Salt bridge is U-shaped tube containing concentrated solution of inert electrolyte like KCl, KNO3, etc., or a solidified solution of such an electrolyte here in agar-agar or a gelatin substance, semi-solid paste we have. So salt bridge mainly contains concentrated solution of inert electrolyte such as KCl or KNO3, or can be solidified solution of such an electrolyte, that is nothing but KCl and KNO3, in agar-agar or a gelatin. The function of salt bridge is to complete the inner circuit by flow of ions or to maintain electrical neutrality in the solution of half cells so as to avoid liquid junction potential. The main function is to avoid the charge accumulation and maintain electrical neutrality, and finally to prevent liquid junction potential. Let us see the meaning of accumulation of charge there. Now in this half cell, in the oxidation half cell, zinc is becoming zinc ions there. So zinc ions are going into solution, thereby solution is going to get positive charge because of zinc ions which are present in the solution. When it comes to other half of the cell here, the copper ions are getting reduced to copper, thereby sulfate anions are left here. So around this you are going to get negative charge because of the sulfate anions there. So around anode we are going to get a positive charge accumulation here. Around cathode you are going to get a negative charge. Because of the charge accumulation here, current will not flow continuously. Now the salt bridge, the electrolytes that are in the salt bridge, they are preventing charge accumulation and maintaining the electrical neutrality of the solution. Thereby they avoid liquid junction potential. There is a role played by salt bridge. Now let us see the main differences between galvanic cell and electrolytic cell. In galvanic cell, the reaction is spontaneous reaction, whereas in the electrolytic cell, the reaction is non-spontaneous. Means it requires continuous flow of current for the reaction to happen in the case of electrolytic cell. Galvanic cell, anode is negatively charged and cathode is positively charged. Whereas in the case of electrolytic cell, anode is positively charged and cathode is negatively charged. And we can see in the construction of galvanic cell, salt bridge is present. Means it requires a salt bridge or a porous spot requirement is there for construction of galvanic cell. Such kind of arrangement is not required in the case of electrolytic cell. Means we don't require any salt bridge in the case of electrolytic cell. These are only the main differences between these two. Then comes the meaning of electrode potential. It is a potential developed when a metal is in contact with the solution of its own ions. Potential developed when a metal is in contact with the solution of its own ions. Now coming towards meaning of standard electrode potential, when you take 1 molar concentration of solution at 1 atmosphere pressure and 25 degrees Celsius, potential at these conditions itself is called standard electrode potential. Means potential developed at 25 degrees Celsius, 1 atmosphere pressure and in contact with 1 molar solution itself is called standard electrode potential. The absolute value, that is E naught value, cannot be determined because oxidation or reduction half cell reactions cannot occur alone. So we cannot find out absolute value of E naught because half cell reactions will not occur alone. They are always accompanied by two half cell reactions. So it is determined only by using a reference electrode. A reference is used in the cases to measure the electrode potential. And for reference electrode, we use normal hydrogen electrode used as a reference electrode to find out the potential of other electrodes. Let us now see the construction of a reference electrode. That is also known as standard hydrogen electrode. So this consists of a glass tube through which hydrogen gas is passed at a pressure of 1 atmosphere. H2 gas is bubbled over the platinum plate here, which is placed in 1 molar solution of H+. We have here 1 molar solution, that is, this solution is 1 molar of H+ we have. So we are passing H2 gas, 1 atmosphere pressure at 25 degrees Celsius over a platinum plate and which is placed in a solution of 1 molar H+ ions. Then the potential developed itself is taken as 0. The reference for us potential is taken as 0. And this can be represented as platinum electrode supporter only for us and H2 gas passed at 1 atmosphere and this is in contact with H+ ions of 1 molar solution and its E naught value is taken as 0. This is called standard hydrogen electrode. It is now connected to other electrodes whose potential is to be determined. So standard hydrogen electrode consists of H2 gas bubbled over platinum electrode placed in solution of 1 molar H+ ions whose potential is taken as 0. Then comes the representation of hydrogen electrode. So platinum is only a supporter there, H2 gas 1 atmosphere, we have H+ ions of 1 molar solution and potential is taken as 0. This is a representation of standard hydrogen electrode. Then comes electrochemical series or as ECS. So the potential of various electrodes are determined with reference to hydrogen and arranged in the increasing order of electrode potentials. The potential of various electrodes are determined with reference to hydrogen and arranged in the increasing order of their standard potentials, which itself is called electrochemical series. Nothing but arrangement of electrodes in increasing order of their standard electrode potentials itself is called electrochemical series. Let us see the uses of electrochemical series now. To predict the relative oxidizing and reducing power, higher the E naught value, that is going to be a stronger oxidizing agent. Lower the E naught value is going to be a stronger reducing agent. Suppose when you take the E naught values of say zinc ion value is equal to 0.76, we have negative value for this. Suppose you take silver, potential is zero point 0.8 volts, we have is a positive value here. Among these two, zinc is said to be negative value, means lower value. So zinc is going to have oxidizing power when compared to silver ion. Silver ion is having a positive value. So higher negative SRP is supposed to be strong reducing agent. Higher positive SRP is going to be stronger oxidizing agent. Then to predict whether metal can displace H2 gas from dilute acids. Again here also, metals with negative E0 value can displace H2 gas, whereas metals with positive E0 value cannot displace H2 gas. Again from these two metal ions here, zinc having a negative value can displace H2 from HCl solution, whereas silver having a positive value cannot displace hydrogen from the acids. So we can know which metal displaces hydrogen from acids by seeing their electrode potential values. Then another application of ECS is also used to calculate standard free energy change of a reaction, and E0 value can be known from the electrode potentials. From that we can find out the delta G0 value. So delta G0 free energy change can be given as minus NF E0. This E0 value can be known from electrochemical series, and value of N nothing but number of electron transfer. F is a value of the Faraday. From this we can know the standard free energy change of the half reaction. Then comes Nernst equation for electrode potentials and applications of the Nernst equation. The relation between concentration of ions and electrode potential is given by Nernst equation. It is as follows. So E is given as E0 plus 2.303 RT by NF log of M plus N by M. This can be taken as for this reaction, say M plus N aqueous solution plus N electrons giving rise to M. For this reaction we can say is a formula, means E is equal to E0 of this M plus N plus electrons, and here 2.303 RT by NF. This N stands for number of electrons here, log of M plus N, concentration of these M plus ions, by M, concentration of M, the metal here. And substituting the standard values, say temperature 298 Kelvin, value of Faraday 96,500 here, value of R 8.314, substituting all values, finally we are going to get this entire thing as 0.059 by N into log of M plus N, where M plus N stands for the concentration of the ions in its aqueous solution. So the relation between the concentration of the ions and electrode potential is given by Nernst equation. Let us now see the applications of Nernst equation now. EMF of the half cell can be calculated. So E is equal to E0 of 0.0591 by N into log of M plus N. So once you know the concentration of the ions and its standard value, we can know the potential of the half cell. Potential of the half cell depends upon the standard potential value as well as the concentration of the ions in which it is placed here. So second thing, we can also find out the E0 of the cell. E0 is given as E0 of cathode minus E0 of anode. So E0 of cell is equal to E0 of cathode minus E0 of anode. From these two values we can find out the E0 of cell. Then comes EMF of the cell can be calculated. Again E is equal to E of cathode minus E of anode. Individually these E values can be known again from the previous expression. From those two expressions we can find out the value of E. And finally equilibrium constant can be calculated. E0 is given as 0.059 by N into log K. So therefore value of K can be found out once you know the value of E0. These are the applications of Nernst equation. Then comes products of electrolysis. The products are depending upon nature of electrolyte as well as the nature of electrode used. The products of electrolysis depend upon nature of electrolyte and the nature of electrode used. If electrode is inert in nature, then products depend upon the nature of electrolyte. So for example, when you take copper chloride and with say platinum electrodes, means inert electrodes here. Here, first of all, ionization takes place. So CuCl2 ionizes to Cu plus 2 and then 2 Cl minus ions. At cathode, so copper ions, cations move towards cathode. Their reduction takes place. Deposition of copper takes place here now. At anode here, anions move towards anode to 2 Cl minus gives rise to, that is undergoes oxidation, liberates Cl2 gas plus electrons here now. So when electrode is inert in nature, the products are just depending upon electrolyte which we are using there now. So when electrode is inert, the nature of the products depend upon electrolyte. Suppose if electrode is active in nature, then the nature of the products will be independent of nature of electrolyte used. Nature of the products will be independent of that. Let us take same example but active electrode now. Let us take CuCl2 solution, now having copper electrodes now. CuCl2 but copper electrode. Now here at anode, when anode is active in nature, always anode itself undergoes oxidation, means copper undergoes oxidation there. That is loss of electrons takes place. At cathode, reaction is same as the previous one. Copper ions start undergoing reduction at cathode. Deposition of copper takes place now. So implies it's independent of the electrolyte which you are using. Only anode always gets oxidized and forms a coating on cathode. It's independent of the nature of electrolyte used. Then batteries or cells. There are two types of batteries mainly. Primary, or which can be recharged, dry cell and mercury cell. Secondary cells which are primary cells which cannot be recharged. Secondary cells are which can be recharged. Recharged cells, example, lead storage battery, NiCad cell, nickel cadmium cell. And fuel cells are those in which electrical energy is produced from the combustion of the fuels. Fuel cells are those in which electrical energy is produced by the combustion of fuel cells. So primary cells, they cannot be recharged. Secondary cells, they can be recharged. Let us see two examples now. So in primary cell, take an example of dry cell. So anode is zinc. The zinc vessel is acting as anode here, and graphite cathode is used. Electrolyte used is manganese MnO2 plus graphite is used with a paste of ammonium chloride and zinc chloride. This is used in the case of primary cell, that is a dry cell. Secondary is a lead storage battery. Anode is lead and cathode lead dioxide we have. Electrolyte used is H2SO4. Let us see now the basic reactions taking place in say one example, say primary cell now. That dry cell we have taken. The dry cell consists of zinc container. The entire vessel, the outer one is zinc container here now. The outer vessel is zinc container. Zinc container itself is acting as anode. And a graphite rod is placed at the center. The graphite rod is placed at the center here. The graphite rod placed at the center of the cylinder is acting as cathode. So graphite rod acts as a cathode here, and the vessel itself is acting as anode. Now, the anode is in contact with the paste of ammonium chloride. If you see the anode here, this outer vessel anode is in contact with the paste made out of ammonium chloride and then zinc chloride. And cathode here, the middle one, cathode here, is surrounded by a paste of manganese dioxide. Here we have a manganese dioxide plus again carbon powder is placed in this. So the graphite rod is surrounded by manganese dioxide and carbon, and a zinc plate or a zinc we can say the container is along with the ammonium chloride and the zinc chloride we have. Now reactions taking place. So let us take first of all at anode. At anode always oxidation takes place here. So zinc, the vessel itself undergoing oxidation, use Zn plus 2 and electrons here. Coming towards cathode, cathode is here carbon cathode, and substance present along with the cathode is MnO2 and graphite. MnO2 now takes up the electrons. So therefore at cathode, MnO2 is having plus 4 state here. MnO2, we have a paste around this, so there should be moisture also in that. Will take up the electron here, giving rise to It forms here MnOOH, basic manganese oxide plus hydroxide ions are been given here. And here the state is plus 3 now. So plus 4 is becoming plus 3, means it requires only one electron there. When you see the overall reaction here, so zinc plus MnO2 plus H2O giving rise to, it will be Zn plus 2 plus MnOOH plus OH minus we have. Actually we are getting here, we require one electron, we are getting here 2 electrons. We need to multiply everything into 2 and then 2. This is the overall reaction we wrote here. That is a zinc is acting as anode and MnO2 is accepting electrons here. So graphite is acting as a cathode. This is regarding dry cell and main reactions of dry cell. So with this we have come to an end electrochemistry. Today we will discuss important points from solutions and colligative properties. First let us see the meaning of solution. It is a homogeneous mixture of 2 or more substances is called solution. Then comes meaning of binary solution. A solution which contains 2 substances is called a binary solution. Next, meaning of dilute solution. A solution containing very small amount of solute and large amount of solvent is called dilute solution. So, solution is homogeneous mixture of 2 or more components. Binary solution means a solution which contains 2 components. Very dilute solution means a solution which contains very small amount of solute and large amount of solvent in that. Now first, molality and mole fraction. Molality is defined as number of moles of solute dissolved in 1 kilogram of solvent. Number of moles of solute in 1 kilogram of solvent. Now if you take W2 as a weight of solute and say M2 as a molar mass of solute, with W2 by M2 we are going to get number of moles of solute. So W2 is the mass of solute, M2 is the molar mass of solute. So this gives rise to number of moles of solute. By W1 is the mass of solvent in grams. So 1000 comes to the top. So molality can be given as mass of solute by molar mass of solute into 1000 by volume of solvent in grams. There is a formula for molality. Then comes meaning of mole fraction. Mole fraction is the ratio of number of moles of a component to total number of moles of all the components of solution. Ratio of number of moles of a component of a solution to total number of moles of all the components of solution. Suppose when you take N2 as number of moles of solute, say in N1 number of moles of solvent, then mole fraction of solute can be taken as N2 by N1 plus N2. Similarly, mole fraction of solvent can be taken as N1 by N1 plus N2. So this is regarding mole fraction. Now comes molality and mole fraction, the properties of those two. Molality and mole fraction do not change on changing temperature because they are not related to volume of solution. Both are having mass and moles only. So therefore, they are not related to volume of solution. Hence, molality as well as mole fraction are independent of temperature. Then comes the vapor pressure of liquid type of solutions. So both the components are liquid states. Now here, the pressure is given by Raoult's law. It states that in a binary solution of 2 liquids, the partial vapor pressure of each component is proportional to mole fraction of that component in the solution. So partial vapor pressure of a component is proportional to mole fraction of that component in solution. Suppose we have 2 components A and then B. The partial pressure of A is proportional to mole fraction of A. Partial pressure of B proportional to mole fraction of B. Means we have a solution having 2 components A and then B, and respective mole fractions are XA, EXB. Now the pressure, partial vapor pressure is PA and then PB. So PA is proportional to mole fraction of the component A, PB proportional to mole fraction of the component B. Removing the proportionality constant here, PA is given by P naught A into XA, where P naught A is nothing but the vapor pressure of pure component A. Similarly, PB is given as P naught B into XB, where P naught B is the vapor pressure of pure component B. When you take the total pressure of entire solution, which is taken as PT, will be equal to P naught A into XA plus P naught B into XB. So P naught A XA plus P naught B XB gives the total pressure of the entire system. Then next, the meaning of ideal solution. So we now know the partial pressures of both the components now. A solution which obeys the Raoult's law at all temperatures and all concentrations is called ideal solution. So for ideal solution, the total pressure must be equivalent to, for ideal solution, PT should be equal to P naught A XA plus P naught B XB. This is for ideal solution. In an ideal solution, force of attraction between the molecules in pure state is same as that in solution. Suppose there are two components A and then B. The interaction between the A and then B in the solution should be same as interaction between A as well as B and B in respect to solvents or respect to components. Then that is said to be ideal solution. In ideal solution, interaction between say solute and solvent will be same as solute-solute interactions as well as solvent-solvent interactions. And enthalpy of mixing and enthalpy of change in the volume will be equal to 0 for an ideal solution. And examples will be, they must have similar force of attractions present between the components. Let us see the basic differences here. So ideal solution and non-ideal solution has two different types further, positive deviations and negative deviation we have now. So ideal solution obeys Raoult's law at all conditions now, and non-ideal will not obey Raoult's law. Enthalpy of mixing is equal to 0. Means when you are mixing solute and solvent, suppose A and B are solute and solvent here. So we are mixing A and B here, there cannot be any enthalpy change taking place. So therefore we call it the delta H mixing is 0. In the case of positive deviation solutions, when you are mixing A and then B here, absorption of heat takes place. They are endothermic in nature. So therefore delta H mixing will be more than 0, means positive value, stands for endothermic in nature. When it comes to negative deviation solutions, we are mixing the components A and then B, they start liberating heat now. So they are said to be enthalpy mixing is equal to negative value, they are exothermic in nature. When it comes to the volume of the total mixture, suppose you have 1 liter A and 1 liter B. In the case of ideal solution, you are going to get 2 liters of solution. Means the total volume of the solution will be equal to sum of the volumes of the components which are mixed. In the case of ideal solution, so delta V mixing, there is no change in the volume after mixing the solution. Suppose when you are talking about say positive deviation solution here, the total volume of the solution will be always more than the sum of the component volumes. Means when you mix 1 liter of A and 1 liter of B, you are always going to get more than 2 liters. The volume of solution is going to be more than 2. So change is going to be positive. When it comes to negative deviation solutions here, when you are mixing 1 liter A, 1 liter B, we are going to get a total volume less than 2 liters. Means some volume gets reduced in the case of negative deviation solutions. When it comes to interactions, in the case of ideal solutions, AB interactions means say solid and solid interactions are same as that of AA and then BB interactions. When it comes to positive deviation solutions here, AB interactions means solute solid interactions are weaker than that of solute-solute and solvent-solvent interactions. Means in solution they have a weaker interactions now. When it comes to negative deviation solutions there, the A and B interactions are stronger when compared to that of interactions of AA and then BB. Means in solution, they are more attracted towards each other, thereby they will not vaporize much. Hence, the total vapor pressure is going to be less than that obtained from Raoult's law. When it comes to examples here we need to see that the same force of interactions must be there between the components. Such will be the examples of ideal solution. When you take a positive deviation solutions, they must be having lesser interactions between the solid and solvent. Negative means they must be having more interaction between solid and solvent. That way we need to select the examples now. This is regarding differences between ideal solutions and then non-ideal solutions. Next one, meaning of azeotropic mixtures. Azeotropic mixture is a liquid mixture which on boiling gives vapors having same composition as that of liquid mixture. Means the composition of the vapor and the composition of the liquid mixture remains same. Then that is said to be azeotropic mixture. And azeotropic mixtures cannot be separated by fractional distillation. They must be done by different methods. This is regarding meaning of azeotropic mixtures. Excuse me. Then comes colligative properties. These are the properties which depend on number of solute particles in a given solvent, but irrespective of nature of solute particles. So solute particles nature will not decide colligative property. Solute particle number only decides the colligative property. So property which depends upon the number, not upon the nature itself is called colligative property. And we come across 4 colligative properties. One is relative lowering of vapor pressure, elevation of boiling point, depression in freezing point, and osmotic pressure. Relative lowering of vapor pressure, elevation of boiling point, depression in freezing point, and then osmotic pressure. We have altogether 4 colligative properties are there. Let us take the first one regarding relative lowering of vapor pressure. Let us see the meaning of vapor pressure first. It is a pressure exerted by the vapor of liquid when the vapor is in equilibrium with the liquid. So we have a pressure above that itself is called vapor pressure. Pressure exerted by the vapor of liquid when vapor is in equilibrium with the liquid. And the vapor pressure increases on increasing temperature. Because when we increase the temperature, more vaporization takes place, and so we get more vapor and creates more vapor pressure. Therefore, the vapor pressure increases on increasing temperature. But when you add a non-volatile solute to a solution, the vapor pressure of solvent gets reduced. When a non-volatile solute is added, then we can see the decreasing in the vapor pressure. The decrease in the vapor pressure, which is nothing but P0 minus P, itself is called lowering of vapor pressure. We can take P0 as the vapor pressure of pure solvent and P as that of solution. The solution is going to have lesser pressure when compared to pure solvent. The decrease itself is known as lowering of vapor pressure. Then comes meaning of relative lowering, nothing but ratio. Ratio of lowering of vapor pressure to that of pure pressure itself is called relative lowering. So P0 minus P, the P0 is defined as relative lowering of vapor pressure. This is regarding the vapor pressure. Then comes Raoult's law, relative lowering of vapor pressure. Raoult's law, it states that relative lowering of vapor pressure of a solution of a non-volatile solute in a solvent is equal to mole fraction of the solute in solution. Raoult's law states that relative lowering of vapor pressure of a solution of non-volatile solute in a solvent is equal to mole fraction of the solute in the solution. Means P0 minus P by P0 is nothing but relative lowering of vapor pressure, which is equal to P0 minus P by P0 we have is equal to mole fraction of solute, which can be taken as N2 by N1 plus N2. This is regarding relative lowering of vapor pressure. Let us see the conditions now where it can be applied. The law is applicable only in the case of solute should be non-volatile. Otherwise, lowering of vapor pressure will not take place. It should be very much dilute to ignore the number of moles of solute in denominator. So means for a dilute solution, N1 plus N2 can be nearly taken as N1 because we have very small amount of number of moles of solute. We have a larger amount of number of moles of solvent. So in denominator we can ignore number of moles of solute there now. So here, so P naught minus P by P naught is equal to N2 is taken as number of moles of solute. N1 is taken as number of moles of solvent here. So N1 is solvent moles and N2 is taken as solute moles. So N1 plus N2 is taken as N1 because solvent will be always more when compared to solute in the dilute solutions. And relative lowering of the vapor pressure is determined experimentally by Ostwald-Walker method. By Ostwald-Walker method, relative lowering of vapor pressure is determined. Then comes second property, elevation of the boiling point symbolized as delta TB. When a non-volatile solid is added, just now we have seen that its vapor pressure decreases. When you are adding a non-volatile solid, the vapor pressure of solution decreases. Therefore, a solution must be heated to high temperature so that its vapor pressure becomes equal to atmospheric pressure. We know that boiling point will be the temperature at which the vapor pressure must become equal to atmospheric pressure. When a solution has a lesser vapor pressure, it must be heated to higher temperature so that the vapor pressure becomes equal to atmospheric pressure. That means, so the boiling point of solution is always higher than that of pure solvent. So boiling point of solution is higher than the boiling point of pure solvent. The difference in the boiling point delta TB is found to be proportional to molality of solution. Difference in the boiling point delta TB is found to be proportional to the molality of solution. Now, if T naught is a boiling point of pure solvent and T is the boiling point of solution, so T minus T naught will be equal to delta TB, which is called elevation of the boiling point, is proportional to molality. And delta TB is equal to Kb into M, where Kb is called molal elevation constant, also known as ebullioscopic constant. Ebullioscopic constant means it is a elevation in the boiling point for 1 molal solution. Means if you take small m is equal to 1, then delta TB is becoming equal to Kb only. So therefore, Kb can be defined as elevation in the boiling point for 1 molal solution. So elevation in the boiling point is directly proportional to molality. Then comes a relation between the molar mass elevation in the boiling point. So here delta TB is given as Kb into molality, which is equal to Kb into molality is equal to number of moles of solute by number of moles of by mass of solvent in kilograms we have. So number of moles of solute can be taken as mass of solute. It is mass of solute by its molar mass into, let us take here mass of solvent. Mass of solvent. If it says in grams, then 1000 comes here now, which is equal to, if you take mass of solute as say mass of, now complete, here they are given as molar mass here. So we require molar mass of substance then now. This is equal to delta TB is equal to Kb into. Now Kb into this, so molar mass is equal to, so molar mass will be equal to, so mass of solute, that is Kb is there, Kb into mass of solute into 1000 is present, 1000 by delta TB on cross multiplication, delta TB into it is mass of solvent. Mass of solvent we have. So means molar mass can be taken as Kb into W2 into 1000 here. WT is taken as mass of solute for us, mass of solute, and W1 is taken as mass of solvent there. So using this relation we can find out, that is to say delta TB is equal to Kb into molality. Molality must be expanded further. From that we can know the molar mass of solute also. Now, from thermodynamics, it can be shown that Kb is related to boiling point of pure solvent. So, Kb is equal to R T naught square by 1000 into Lv. Here T naught stands for boiling point of pure solvent. Lv stands for latent heat of vaporization. So, Kb is given by R T naught square by 1000 Lv, where T naught is equal to boiling point of pure solvent. Lv is equal to latent heat of vaporization. This is regarding elevation the boiling point. Then comes depression in the freezing point. The freezing point of a solution is always found to be lower than that of pure solvent. Freezing point of a solution is found to be lower than that of pure solvent. The difference in the freezing point delta Tf is found to be proportional to molality in this case. Now, difference in the freezing point delta Tf is found to be proportional to molality. If you take T naught as a freezing point of pure solvent and a T as that of the solution here, T naught minus T can be taken as delta Tf, which is called a depression in the freezing point. So solution is going to have always lesser freezing point when compared to that of pure solvent. Now it is being proportional to molality. Therefore, delta Tf is equal to Kf into molality, and here Kf is called molal depression constant, or else called cryoscopic constant, and then is defined as depression in the freezing point for 1 molal solution. Here also, when you take molality m is equal to 1, then you are going to get delta Tf as Kf only. So therefore, cryoscopic constant is defined as depression in the freezing point for 1 molal solution. We can expand molality further by mass of solute by molar mass of solute into 1000 by volume of solvent in grams we can take, and changing you are going to get molar mass of solvent as molar mass as that of M2 is given to us. Means formula is same thing only, delta Tf is equal to Kf. Expand molality as moles of solute, so moles of solute by mass of solvent. Solvent here, it should be in kilograms now. Again, moles can be expanded further, that is a mass of solute by molar mass of solute we can take. That way we are going to get the molar mass of solute now. Molar mass of solute is equal to M2, not molar mass of solid, it's molar mass of solute we have. This is solute molar mass. Then continuation. From thermodynamics, it can be shown that Kf is related to the freezing point of solvent. So Kf is given as RT naught square 1000 Lf, where T naught itself is called freezing point of solvent. Lf is called latent heat of fusion per gram. This is regarding freezing point depression. Then comes osmosis, the phenomenon in which solvent molecules move from a solution of lower concentration of solute to a solution of higher concentration of solute through semi-permeable membrane is known as osmosis. The phenomenon in which solvent molecules move from a solution of lower concentration of solute to a solution of higher concentration of solute through semi-permeable membrane is called osmosis. And meaning of this semi-permeable membrane is a membrane through which only solvent molecules can pass but not solute particles. The membrane through which only a solvent molecules can pass but not solute particles. This has been repeated here twice, so ignore this. In which only a solvent molecules can pass but not solute particles. Then comes a formula for osmotic pressure. Now, osmotic pressure is given by Van 't Hoff's equation. According to Van 't Hoff's equation, the osmotic pressure is given by pi is equal to CRT, where C is equal to concentration in terms of molarity. And C can be taken as mass of solute by molar mass of solute and then divided by volume. Volume should be in liters, where C is a concentration in terms of moles per liter. Means C can be replaced by even M also, where M stands for molarity. So pi can be taken as is M into R into T, where M stands for molarity of solution. So if at all the osmotic pressure is given in atmospheres, then value of R comes out to be 0.0821 in the formula. If you are giving osmotic pressure in terms of Pascal, then value of R comes out to be 8.314. So the osmotic pressure is given by the formula pi is equal to MRT, where M stands for the molarity of the solution. Then the meaning of osmotic pressure. It is a minimum excess pressure that has to be applied on solution just prevent the entry of solvent into the solution through semi-permeable membrane. The excess pressure that must be applied on solution so that it prevents the entry of solvent into solution through semi-permeable membrane. Means we are trying to prevent the osmosis. To prevent osmosis, amount of pressure that must be applied itself is called osmotic pressure. The meaning of isotonic solutions. Now, different solutions having same osmotic pressure at same temperature are called isotonic solutions. Implies isotonic solutions will have same molar concentrations if there is no dissociation or else association of solid particles. So concentrations will be remaining same in isotonic solutions. Then comes hypertonic solution. Hypertonic, a solution having higher osmotic pressure itself is called hypertonic solution. When it comes to hypotonic solution means a solution having lower osmotic pressure itself is called hypotonic solution with reference to another solution. Then abnormal colligative properties. Colligative property mainly depends upon number of solute particles, and solute should not dissociate nor associate. Suppose if solute dissociates, in the solution now contains more number of particles than expected if it dissociates now. In such a case, the observed colligative property will be higher than the expected one. We have more particles in solution because solute is dissociating. So more particles are there. Thereby, the observed colligative property is going to be higher than the expected value. And colligative property is inverse to molar mass. So thereby, observed molar mass is found to be lesser than the expected molar mass now. Colligative property proportional to number of particles but inverse to the molar mass of the substance. Suppose if solute undergoes association, then you are going to have less number of particles in solution. Then solution contains a lesser number of particles than expected. In such case, observed colligative property would be less than the expected value, and therefore observed molar mass is going to be more than the expected value. So a solute should not dissociate or associate. If it dissociates or associates, accordingly colligative property observed values are going to be different. Now the meaning of Van't Hoff factor I. The ratio between experimental colligative property and a theoretical colligative property is taken as Van't Hoff factor I. That is to say, experimental Cp by theoretical Cp itself is called Van't Hoff factor I. So I is equal to taken as experimental Cp value by it is theoretical Cp value. So we can know the experimental value if you know the value of I into theoretical value now. Now how to get the value of I? Relation between the Van't Hoff factor and the degree of dissociation. In the case of dissociation, alpha will be given as I minus 1 by n minus 1. Alpha is called degree of dissociation. I is a Van't Hoff factor. And the value of n depends upon the solute. Suppose if NaCl is taken, then the value of n will be equal to 2 because NaCl gives us 2 particles per mole. And if you take suppose BaCl2 is given to us, so n value become equal to 3 then now. Suppose you have taken Al2SO4 taken thrice here, total number of particles here n is equal to 5. In that way number of particles given by a molecule can be taken as value of n in this case. Suppose we have association, then the formula will be I minus 1 by n minus 1, and 1 by n minus 1 here, n is the degree of association there. In this case, suppose we have a dimer, something like say CH3COOH, it undergoes dimerization. So 2 here now, we are going to get here CH3 COOH taken twice. Then the value of N is taken as 2. So value of N is equal to 2 in the case of dimerization. Trimerization, N is equal to 3. Tetramerization is equal to 4, and so on and so forth. This is the relation between the Van 't Hoff factor and degree of dissociation. Today we will discuss important points from solid state chemistry. First of all, meaning of solid substance. Substances having definite size and shape are called solids, and solids are classified into two different categories. First one is crystalline solid, other one is called amorphous solid. When it comes to crystalline solid, they have regular arrangement of particles. Due to this, they have definite geometry. When it comes to amorphous solids, they do not have regular arrangement of particles. Therefore, they do not have regular geometry or shape. And the properties are said to be anisotropic in the case of crystalline solids. That is because they have physical properties such as refractive index, conductivity, different in different directions. Therefore, the properties are anisotropic. When it comes to amorphous solids, their properties are said to be isotropic because they have various physical properties same in all directions. They have same in all directions. They have different values in different directions in the case of crystalline solids. Hence, they are called anisotropic. So, isotropic stands for same properties in all directions. They have sharp melting point, and here they do not have sharp melting point. And coming towards, in the case of amorphous solids, when you are heating it, they first of all soften. They soften and start flowing down. In the case of amorphous solids, there is no sharp melting point. They have definite heat of fusion in crystalline solids. They do not have definite heat of fusion in the case of amorphous solids. When you take examples of crystalline solids, we can say sodium chloride, then potassium chloride, graphite. These are the examples of some of the examples of crystalline solids we have. Amorphous solids, we can take rubber, plastic, and say glass. They are said to be amorphous solids. Let us take now different types of crystalline solids. Types of crystalline solids. Crystalline solids may contain atoms, ions, or molecules at the lattice points. They may have atoms, ions, or molecules at the lattice point. Depending on the nature of these particles, there are four types of crystalline solids. Depending on the nature of the particles present at lattice points, there are four types of crystalline solids. First of all, ionic crystals. Now, ionic crystals contain cations and anions at their lattice points. So, for example, rock salt, that is NaCl. So, NaCl contains Na plus and Cl minus ions at the lattice points of the crystal. So, ionic crystal contain cations, anions at the lattice points. Covalent crystals. The covalent crystals contain covalently bonded atoms at the lattice points. So, for example, diamond. So, covalent crystals contain covalently bonded atoms at their lattice points. Coming towards molecular solids or molecular crystals, the molecular crystals contain molecules of chemical substances at the lattice points. They have molecules of chemical substances at the lattice points. These molecules are held either by van der Waals forces or dipole interactions or even by hydrogen bonding now. So these molecules are held by van der Waals forces or dipole interactions or hydrogen bonds. So for example, dry ice, that is solid carbon dioxide, and solid ammonia are the examples of molecular crystals. So molecular crystals contain molecules at the lattice points of the crystal. Then comes metallic crystal. Metallic crystal contains metal ions at the lattice points submerged in a sea of electrons. So metallic crystals contain metal ions in the lattice points submerged in the sea of electrons. And metallic bond strength depends upon the number of electrons involving in the metallic bond. Metallic bond strength depends on number of electrons involving in the metallic bond. So metals such as copper, zinc, silver, etc. have metallic crystals. Then comes meaning of space lattice, unit cell, and then lattice points. Space lattice, unit cell, and lattice point. Space lattice means a regular arrangement of lattice points in 3 dimensions. So when you take this one, we have a regular arrangement of points are there in 3 dimensions now. The entire thing can be called as space lattice now. This is called space lattice. So space lattice contains a regular arrangement of lattice points in say 3-dimensional space. It's called space lattice. And the point in a space lattice, here, space lattice, which represents the constituent particle which may be atom, molecular ion, is called lattice point. So these are the lattice points which are actually representing the atom or ion in the space lattice now. And coming towards the meaning of unit cell, the smallest portion of entire space lattice, which when repeated in 3 dimensions generates the complete space lattice itself is called unit cell. The smallest portion itself is called unit cell, which actually gives the properties of the entire space lattice. So space lattice, unit cell, lattice points. So lattice points means the points which are actually representing atoms or ions or molecules in the space lattice. And the unit cell means the smallest portion which when repeated 3-dimensionally generates the entire space lattice. These are the definitions of space lattice, unit cell, and lattice points. Then the same thing repeated once again, the lattice, crystal lattice. Crystal lattice or space lattice is defined as regular pattern of lattice points which indicate 3-dimensional arrangement of atoms, ions, or molecules. Then lattice points. A point in a crystal lattice which represents the constituent particle which may be atom or molecular ion is called lattice point. And the smallest portion of space lattice which when repeated in 3 dimensions generates the entire crystal, and it represents the properties of the space lattice. Unit cell represents the properties of the space lattice. This is regarding the basic fundamental definitions. Coordination number. Coordination number is number of nearest neighboring particles present in crystal. Number of nearest neighboring particles present in a crystal itself is called coordination number. Let us take the previous structure once. If we take the middle one here, it is surrounded by altogether 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6 now. It is surrounded by altogether 6 are there here. That is 1, this is 1 here, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6. Therefore, in a simple cube, the coordination number will be 6. Now, similarly, the coordination number in body-centered cube will be 8 and in FCC will be 12. These are the coordination numbers. One has to remember. Simple cube, it is 6. Body-centered cube, 8. Face-centered cube, 12 we have. Next, types of cubic lattices. Simple cube has altogether 8 lattice points at 8 corners. So in the 8 corners we have, these are called lattice points. Altogether 8 lattice points are there in simple cube. When it comes to body-centered cube, total number of lattice points are 9 in number. So along with the corners we have 1 at the body center. So total number of lattice points are 9 in this case. Then comes in face-centered cube here. In face-centered cube, 8 at the corners and 6 at the face centers we have. There are the face centers. Total number comes to 14 lattice points in the face-centered cubic structure. These are the number of lattice points. Then comes how to calculate number of particles per each unit cell. Calculation of number of particles per each unit cell. Atom in the corner is shared by 8 unit cells now. Therefore, its contribution will be 1/8 towards the unit cell. So atom in the corner is shared by 8 unit cells. Therefore, contribution will be 1/8 now. Atom in the face is shared by 2 unit cells. Therefore, the contribution comes to only half towards the unit cell then now. And the edge is shared by 4 unit cells. Therefore, contribution will be 1/4 in the case of edge atom. Finally, atom at the center is shared by only 1 unit cell. So, the contribution comes out to be 1. So, using the contributions here, we can now calculate number of particles per each unit cell. Now, let us see the calculation part. Unit cell. We have taken simple cube. Simple cube contains only atoms in the corner. So 8 corners into 1/8 we have. There are no atoms in the face or else center. Totally it comes to be 1. So simple cube contains only 1 atom altogether. In face centers, we have atoms at the corner as well as face also. 8 corners, 1/8, 6 faces, 1/2. Totally value comes to 4 then now. Body centered one, we have atoms at the corner as well as the center of the cube. So therefore 8 corners, 1/8, no face center atom here, and body center 1 we have, atom comes to altogether 2. End centers, again corners and 2 opposite faces we have, the value comes out to be 2. So in this way we can calculate number of atoms per unit cell. So one has to know the contribution made by each particle towards the unit cell. Then, now the relation between the edge length and the radius of the atom in a given unit cell. When you take a simple cube, if you take only one face of the cube here, atoms will be present along the edge. So this is edge here, this will be radius r and then r. Implies edge length will be equal to 2r in the case of simple cube. In the case of simple cube, edge length will be equal to a, which is equal to 2r. When it comes to face-centered cubic structure, here along the face diagonal, atoms will be touching each other. So one atom here, one more here, one more here now. So therefore here 4r, this is r here, this is 2r, another r we have. So the a root 2 is a face diagonal, a root 2 will be equal to 4r in the case of FCC structure. That way we can find out even for BCC also. Their body diagonal, along body diagonal, atoms touch each other. Therefore, a root 3 will be equal to 4r now. So, simple cube, a is equal to 2r, face centered cube, a root 2 is equal to 4r, and body centered cube, atoms are touching along body diagonal, and body diagonal is equal to a root 3, and a root 3 is equal to 4r in the case of body centered cube. Then, packing efficiency. Packing efficiency is defined as the ratio of volume of the spheres in the unit cell to the volume of the unit cell. Ratio of the volume of the spheres in unit cell to volume of the unit cell. So volume of all atoms in the unit cell by volume of the unit cell. So for example, when you take simple cube, if you take say simple cube now, simple cube has only one atom. Simple cube has one atom altogether. Therefore, its packing efficiency will be equal to volume of that atom by volume of unit cell. Volume of unit cell we have. So therefore, you should find number of atoms of the unit cell and find out the volume of all the atoms of the unit cell divided by the volume of the unit cell. So on calculations, we are going to get packing efficiency for simple cube as 0.52, means it is 52% we have, and FCC 0.74, that is a 74% occupancy we have, and BCC we have 68%. So this can be done on calculations. So packing efficiency of simple cube 0.52, FCC 0.74, BCC 0.68 we have. Then next formula is the density of the unit cell. Density is given by mass of the atoms of unit cell by volume of the unit cell. Fundamental formula, as already know, density is equal to mass by volume. It is now mass of the atoms of the unit cell by volume of the unit cell. And formula it comes to be Z into M by A cube into N. Here Z stands for number of atoms per unit cell. Suppose it is a simple cube, value will be equal to Z is equal to 1 for simple cube, and body centered cube value is equal to 2, and FCC the value is equal to 4. That way the value of Z comes. M is the molar mass of the atoms which are present here. A stands for edge length and N is the Avogadro's number, the constant value. So density is given by Z into M by A cube into N. Then comes closed packing in 3 dimensions now. There are 2 different types of packing we come across. AB type. So AB type is also known as HCP structure. Total number of lattice points are 17. Means if we count all the points here, say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That way we count all of them. The value comes to 17 lattice points are present there now. Now the number of atoms per unit cell is equal to 6 in this case. Because here the corner of atom is shared by 1/6 here. Corner is shared by 1/6. And the middle one, face one shared by, means contribution is half we have. And the center one contribution is equal to 1 we have. Basing upon all these things means 1/6 into 12 and then half into 2 and 1 into 3 we have. Total number comes to altogether 6. So number of atoms per unit cell are 6 now. And coordination number is equal to 12. Suppose when you consider this atom here, around this we have 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Above this we have 3, 1, 2, 3. Similarly below also we are going to get 3 if we continue the structure. Means therefore 6 in that plane and 3 above and 3 below we have. Total number is equal to 12 we have. So HCP structure, total coordination number is equal to 12 and packing efficiency is 74. So AB type is called HCP, lattice points 17, number of atoms 6, coordination number 12 and 75% is the packing efficiency we have. The next one is said to be ABC type we have, and it is also known as FCCRL CCP structure, cubic closed packing or face centered cubic structure we have. Number of lattice points are 14. Already we have seen the number of lattice points in FCC structure in the previous table. Now number of atoms per unit cell also we have seen as 4. Coordination number is 12 and same as that of we have packing efficiency same as that of AB type here. The coordination number 12 you can understand here. If you consider say this atom here in this one, in the plane, along with the plane there are 6 atoms here and 3 are here and 3 are here. Therefore this atom is surrounded by altogether 12. So coordination number is once again 12 in this case. Both have same coordination numbers. So therefore both have same packing efficiencies also. AB type of crystal structure you have. Then comes what are the properties of the cubic cells now. It's actually a summary of all the previous things which you have seen till now. Simple cube, 8 lattice points, number of atoms are 1, coordination number 6 and A is equal to 2R we have seen packing efficiency as 0.52. Body centered cube, lattice points that is 9 we have, means 8 plus 1, 8 corner, 1 in the body center. Number of atoms are 2 altogether, coordination number 8. And A root 3 is equal to 4R because along body diagonal atoms are touching each other and 0.68 here. And FCC structure, lattice points are 14 here, number of atoms are 4, coordination number is 12 here, and here atoms touch along the face diagonal, therefore A root 3 is equal to 4R and packing efficiency is equal to 0.74 we have. Then comes different types of voids we have. 2 types of voids we come across here, tetrahedral void and octahedral void. Tetrahedral void is the vacant space formed by 4 spheres. Itself is called tetrahedral void, and number of tetrahedral voids will be equal to twice the number of atoms or spheres in the crystal. Octahedral void means the vacant space formed by 6 spheres is called octahedral void. Number of octahedral voids is equal to number of atoms in the crystal. Now when you take the ratio of the atoms to voids, say ratio of atoms, say to voids, atoms to voids, the ratio will be say 1:2 we have. Means here number of atoms, so 1 we have. Then this 1 will be octahedral void. The 2 will be tetrahedral voids we have now. So one atom will have one octahedral void and we have there two tetrahedral voids. So the ratio of the atoms to voids in all crystalline structures if they are close packed. There are two tables to remember in solid state chemistry. One is a limiting radius ratio table because the limiting radius ratio gives rise to coordination number and structure. And the meaning of limiting radius ratio is nothing but the ratio of the radius of cation to that of radius of anion. This ratio itself gives rise to the coordination number and the structure. If the radius ratio is between say 0.155 to 0.225, coordination number will be 3. It comes under triangular planar structure. If it is between 0.225 to 0.414, coordination number is 4. Structure will be tetrahedral structure. If it is between 0.414 to 0.732, coordination number is 6, comes out to octahedral structure. And if it is 0.732 to 1, coordination number is 8, comes out to be cubic structure. So we need to remember the ratios, coordination numbers followed by the respective structures we have. Then comes one more table to remember, that is to say Bravais lattice structures now. Now the crystal Bravais lattice structures, there are 7 basic crystal systems which can be categorized into 14 crystal systems we have, and they are called Bravais lattices. Let us take the dimensions of these Bravais lattices. The cubic one, all 3 will be equal axial distances, A is equal to B is equal to C we have. In cubic structure, all angles are also equal, alpha is equal to beta is equal to gamma, and each angle is equal to 90 degrees we have now. Tetragonal structure, one of the lengths will be different, means A is equal to B, not equal to C we have, but again all angles will be equal to 90 degrees we have in the case of tetragonal also now. Then comes orthorhombic form here, all lengths will be unequal, we can say, means no length is equal to other one now, but again here also all angles will be equal to each other and also equal to 90 degrees we have. And there are here in this one we have simple, body centered, face centered, end centered we have. So 4 structures are there in this structure. Then comes rhombohedral form. Once again all lengths are equal in this case, but angles are also equal, but no angle is equal to 90 degrees we have in this structure. So all are equal, all our angles are also equal, but no angle is equal to 90 degrees in this case now. Next comes hexagonal structure. Again one of the lengths is not equal to other one. 2 angles are equal, alpha and beta angle will be 90 degrees here, but gamma will be 120 we have. We have only one structure, a simple structure we have. Then comes monoclinic and triclinic structures we have. Monoclinic and triclinic, in all the structures here, no side is equal in any of these 2 cases now. All sides are different. When it comes to monoclinic here, 2 angles are same. Say alpha is equal to gamma is equal to 90 we have, but here beta is not equal to 90 in this case now. When it comes to triclinic structure, alpha not equal to beta, not equal to gamma here, and also not equal to 90 degrees we have now. So in completely, if we see the summary of all the structures here, most symmetric form is cubic form because all lengths are equal, all angles are also equal, and each is equal to 90 degrees we have. And highly unsymmetric structure is triclinic structure. No side is equal, no angle is also equal in this case, and not equal to even 90 degrees for us now. With this we are done with Bravais lattices. Then comes defects in crystal structures. So stoichiometric defects. The point defect which do not disturb the stoichiometry of solid itself is called stoichiometric defect we have. And there are 2 types here. Schottky defect. This defect is caused when equal number of cations, anions are missing from the lattice, from the crystal lattice. Density of the crystal will be decreasing because number of ions are being lost. So ions are being lost means mass will be getting reduced, but volume of the crystal will not change, and therefore density gets reduced in this one. And these are normally shown by high coordination number compounds like NaCl, KCl, CaCl will have Schottky type of defect where a pair of ions will be missing and density also gets reduced. Next is Frenkel type of defect here. This defect is caused when an anion when an ion, normally it will be cation because of smaller size. When an ion is missing from its lattice point, but present in the interstices of the crystal, it is present somewhere in the structure, but not in its point. That type is said to be Frenkel defective. Density will not change because the atom is present, not missing altogether. No. It is shown by low coordination number compounds like zinc sulfide, silver chloride, silver bromide, silver iodide we have. But we need to remember one point here, AGBR shows both the defects, both the Frenkel as well as Schottky type of defects.